Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we thank everyone who is taking some time to listen to the podcast today. We do understand that you can be utilizing your time to do something else. So we appreciate you taking a moment or some minutes, maybe about 15, 20 minutes, to check out the podcast today. As always, if the information is valuable, you feel it to be worth sharing, you feel that it has in some way given you direction or insight, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast and turn on notifications. That way you'll be notified when each episode is released. We do put out an episode each and every Friday, which is heard on all podcast platforms. And then we put a video out on YouTube every Wednesday as well for those of you who would like to watch the podcast. But in any event, we say thank you and welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today, I want to get into the topic surrounding race and ethnicity. And I want to get into this topic today because there's been a lot of conversations, specifically here in the United States, about race and ethnicity. For those who don't know, for those of you who maybe listen to the broadcast outside of the United States and may not follow our political news or our politics news, there is a election, or this is election season for the presidency of the United States. And, most election years, there's a huge focus on politics and policy and things of that nature. But this year has been, I guess, in my opinion, more explosive or more news driven in terms of the news cycle than I can remember. Maybe I haven't seen it or remember it being this way probably since former President Barack Obama had ran the first time. But in any event, there's been a lot of conversation about race and ethnicity. And today I want to talk about race and ethnicity. Specifically here, first of all, giving it the clarity that it deserves, because I've just heard so many different individuals talking about race and ethnicity. And even though they do blend in some way, they are very distinct and different. So I kind of want to break that down. Then I want to talk about the two candidates, which is Donald Trump, former president, and then also you have the Vice President, Kamala Harris, who's the current vice president. Now she's running for president because former president or current president Joe Biden stepped down. I know it for those outside the country, you're probably saying, what? It's a lot going on. Like I told you, it's just one of those moments where you just go down. So, but let me talk about that today. We want to talk about race and ethnicity. I guess to get started, let me, I guess, kind of give the backdrop. So last week, Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, spoke at the NABJ convention. And for those who don't know, the NABJ stands for the National Association of Black Journalists. And it is an organization that is surrounding Black journalists, or supports, I should say, Black journalists in this country. And every year they have a convention where, the journalists from around the country and all of those in media come descend onto the convention to network, to exchange ideas, to innovate and grow journalism within the Black community. With that, this year, well, let me kind of go back. So every election season for the presidency, the National Association of Black Journalists extends an invitation to each candidate. This year, Donald Trump accepted. From what I understand, Vice President Kamala Harris had a scheduling conflict. I don't know. There was, some things that were already on her calendar. I don't know how, what was the length of time before she got it and had to reject it. Keep in mind, for those who don't know, she just, I think in the last 3 weeks, became the nominee for the Democratic Party, or officially is now the nominee for the Democratic Party to run for president, because current President Joe Biden has decided not to run for a second term. But in any event, she did not attend this event. Donald Trump did. And in that, he was asked a series of questions regarding race and some of his positions regarding, I guess, Black people just in general here in the United States. But in particular, he answered a question, or in that series of questions, he gave an answer that challenged what Kamala Harris's current identity is. And I say current because, as you'll hear in this clip that I'm going to play, he basically reveals that he doesn't know how she identifies in terms of her race and ethnicity. So let me play that, and then I'll continue on from there. Again, this is from the NABJ this past week, and this is former President Donald Trump answering this question. So
she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
And now, and that was his comment during this past week. And that comment, of course, brought out a lot of comments on all sides, right? You had people furious in terms of Black people, African Americans here in the United States, basically saying, how dare he question her heritage, her race, her ethnicity. And then on the flip side of that, you had people saying, well, that's a fair question. How does she identify? And I think it's a fair question, and I'm just speaking, from personal opinion. I think it's a fair question because Kamala Harris has, in the past, very much embraced and acknowledged that she is a child of mixed. I don't like using mixed race, but she is a child of two different backgrounds in terms of ethnicity or nationality. So she has embraced and has acknowledged that she, does have an Indian background, Indian parents. Matter of fact, let me play this clip from. She was on a show a few years ago, I guess, because as a backstory, she ran for president like 5 years ago, but unfortunately didn't become the nominee for the Democratic Party. But she did a show with Mindy Kaling, who was also an Indian woman, and Mindy asked her this specific question about her Indian heritage, her Indian ethnicity. So let me play this, and then I'll kind of go into the conversation about race and ethnicity. So this is Kamala Harris with Mindy Kaling a few years back answering this question.
What we're going to cook today is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because you are Indian.
Yes.
Okay, and I don't know that everybody knows that, but I find that wherever I go and I see Indian people at the supermarket, on the street, everyone's like, Kamala Harris is Indian, right? It's like the thing we're so excited about to have you running for president.
Yeah.
So we're both Indian, but actually we're both South Indian.
Yes. You look like the entire one half of my family.
Okay, thank you.
You do.
And so that's, right from the horse's mouth, you hear, she said, not only does she acknowledge that she's Indian, but in this particular clip, she also acknowledges that, Mindy Kaling looks, familiar to members of her family. So I say all of this because, the outrage that, at least for those who didn't agree with Donald Trump's comments, I kind of thought it was a little bit, over the top, given the fact that she does identify as Indian and also as a Black woman. Now, let's get into that part of the conversation. Now, her mother is, as you noted here in the clip with Mindy Kaling, is of Indian descent, of South Indian descent. And then her father, from what I understand, is Jamaican. So now that is kind of the two sides of her family that gives her the Black side of the family, if you will, and then the Indian side of the family. Now there's questions on the father. Now they're questioning whether, was the father Jamaican, via Africa? I mean, a lot of it is just bizarro land in terms of the questioning itself. And it's bizarro to me because really we're supposed to be talking about what these candidates are going to be bringing to the table in terms of policy and change and innovation for the country. But I go through all of that to kind of now jump into race and ethnicity. And I wanted to talk about that because race and ethnicity are very different. Well, let me not say very different. They are different. Now, again, they kind of intertwine with each other, but they are different. There are different definitions for each. And so I wanted to define both of those and talk about that a little bit. And then I'll probably just close out from there. But getting into race and ethnicity. So I went through a ton of research and articles and journals just to try to get an understanding myself, because I'll be honest, I've used race and ethnicity and interchanged them, together as well. So I think this will be a good education moment for many people who may not know or may just reinforce what some of you already know. So I went and just I finally decided on a definition from Merriam-Webster. Why did I do that? Because this was the most simplistic description that I felt would be good, especially in a broadcast mode, to kind of get right to the point. So Merriam-Webster's dictionary online. Here they go through the history, they go through the difference between race and ethnicity. They also talk about the history and meaning of race, and go on, so on and so forth. But to get right to the crux of it, I'm reading here about ethnicity and race. And it says here, and they gave a great summary that I felt got right to it. It says, race is understood today as primarily a sociological designation that identifies a group sharing some outward physical characteristics or some commonalities of culture and history. And I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to repeat it again. Race is understood today as primarily a sociological designation that identifies a group sharing some outward physical characteristic and some commonalities of culture and history. So, of course, when we begin to talk about outward physical characteristics, specifically here in the United States, we begin with skin color, right? And even though when you also look up the word black, none of us are actually black, right? In terms of how the color is described. But in the United States, people of brown skin, particularly those that have some form of African ancestry in terms of origination, they're considered black people. And it just really has to do, begins with skin tone, and there might be some other physical features, lips, nose, body structure, things of that nature. But that's what defines race. So when they say someone is a white person, they're looking at their outward features. They look like somebody's a black person, they're looking at their outward features. Even when they identify someone as an Asian person, they're looking at their outward features. So race, again, and I'm tripling down on it because I want to make sure we got a clear understanding, has to do with outward physical characteristics or some commonalities of culture and history that you might share. Now, going on into ethnicity. Wanted to define that as well. Ethnicity is a word for something you acquire based on where your family is from. Very important information. And the group which you share cultural, traditional, familiar bonds and experience with. It says the end result, people may have race similarity, but ethnic dissimilarity. And just to go back again, ethnicity is again about based on where your family is from. So now when we get into the conversation that President Trump raised regarding Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris's identity, because he again mixed race with ethnicity, because he said, I don't know if she's black or if she's Indian. And really it's about race more than it is about ethnicity, because although she is from parents that are from two sections of the world, right? The father's from Jamaica, her mother's from southern India. She herself was born here in America. So, she has identified as both because she, in terms of Indian and black, or she really should be, I guess she would identify herself as Indian and Jamaican if she's talking about her ethnicity, but she has identified as both, which for some people is just not enough. They want her to choose a side. And that type of thinking and those type of ideologies are very much a part of American ideology. And this is opinion now, a lot of that is the cause for so much of the dissension and issues that we have relating as a people here in this country, because we're often looking for that. We're often looking to distinguish each other by race and by ethnicity instead of acknowledging each other as human beings. I'll close out with this. Malcolm X talked about this after his pilgrimage to Mecca. And he made that same distinction that I just said about identifying each other as human beings. And, with that, I would encourage you as a voter that you do not get caught up on either side, whether or not the person shares some kind of outward physical characteristic or commonality of your culture. As a voter, your main responsibility is to determine what policies and what policies, ideologies, and what type of innovation will that candidate provide as the leader of the country, and does that fit in with what your ideologies and your motivations are for policy in this country? But I'll close out with this from Malcolm X, and then we'll end it right there. So, as always, if you want to leave a comment, you can leave a comment and reach me on any of the social media platforms. I'm at I am Trey Evans on all social media platforms. You could also reach me at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. And then, of course, you could reach out and leave a comment on the YouTube channel as well. But as always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.
When I was on the pilgrimage, I had close contact with Muslims whose skin would in America be classified as white, and with Muslims who themselves would be classified as white in America. But these particular Muslims didn't call themselves white. They looked upon themselves as human beings, as part of the human family, and therefore they looked upon all other segments of the human family as part of that same family. Now, they had a different look or a different air or a different attitude than that which is reflected in the attitude of the man in America who calls himself white.